I'm really excited to make this video, but there's a lot of pressure on me. I'm doing a video on punning, and as a dad and a wannabe YouTube personality, that puts some pressure on you to make some good jokes. You can't make a video about punning without good puns. And so I did what any responsible person would do this day and age. I went to the LLMs and I told them, give me your best puns. So asked for 10 puns. I read them. I figure whichever ones of these makes me laugh the most, they'll work their way into the script, and you'll see them later on in this video. But bad news, I read those puns. I said, which of these is going to make me laugh? But no pun intended. Yeah, no pun intended. All right, here we go. One pun down. There's going to be at least 4 more over the course of this video. Welcome to Ontology Explained. I'm Casey Hart, philosopher and ontologist, and today we're talking about puns and punning, but in the OWL RDF context. I'm going to tell you what that is, why it's so controversial, how you do it, and then whether you should do it. What are the consequences? Is it worth it? Punning, first, just in general, right? Like outside of an OWL RDF context. A pun is when you make a play on words that suggest 2 or more meanings simultaneously. So if I told you that my wife tried to apply at the post office, but they wouldn't let her, they said only males work there. That's got 2 puns in it, right? The first, letter, could be that they let her, as in allowed her to do it, or letter, as in the thing that you write on and stick in an envelope. And then male can be used both for the sex or gender, as well as thing that gets put in the mailbox. Jokes are always funnier when you have to explain them, right? But the idea here is that we have the same thing that can be used in multiple ways, and that's exactly what's happening in OWL RDF, but there's a more technical and specific sense. So in general, in OWL RDF, a pun is when you take an IRI and that's used to denote more than one entity. But there's a more specific usage of punning in OWL RDF that is controversial, sometimes okay, sometimes not okay. That's the topic of this video. We'll figure out what it is and see examples of it. And that's when you take an IRI to be an instance of 2 incompatible metaclasses. And they're incompatible in the sense that OWL DL, OWL from description logic, is not designed to handle it. We'll talk about those consequences later, but that's what's going on. In particular, it means you take something to be both an OWL named individual and an OWL class, or you take that thing to both be an object and a data type property. And with those definitions at hand, you might even be wondering, like, why would I even want to do this? It sounds like individuals and classes are different things, and object and data type properties are different things. I've watched your other videos on that. Like, what would motivate this sort of thing? So let's drop into Emacs. Let's look at a specific example and see if I can motivate it and see what punning actually feels like. So in this little toy example, we're going to talk about insects. We've got insect as a class, we've got ant as a subclass of that, and endangered species. And let's say that we want to make a pretty plausible assertion. If you're doing some sort of biology example, you're really interested in insects, and you want to say that Formica dirksii is an endangered species of ant. Okay, how might we say that? Well, let's just create Formica dirksii. And this is going to be, it's a type of ant, right? So we're going to say it's a subclass of ants. Awesome. That's pretty easy. But we also want to say that it's an endangered species. And endangered species is a class here. So I'm pretty tempted to say that what is Formica dirksii? It's not a subclass of endangered species. It's an instance of endangered species. And so we'll say a endangered species. And if that seems like a reasonable thing to do, and it's a pretty reasonable thing to do, you are now committed to saying that punning is a pretty reasonable thing to do. That doesn't mean we have to do it. You might try and push back against this instinct. But what I wanted to do here is just motivate it. You called Formica dirksii both a subclass of something, and this line here means that Formica dirksii is a class, because to be a subclass of something is to be a class yourself. But then we also said that it's an instance of endangered species, and that means we're using that RDF type property, and that has a domain of OWL named individual. So here we say that it's an OWL named individual. And this is a problem. This is a problem because in OWL DL, it requires that named individuals and classes are disjoint. You can't be a member of both of those, and yet now we wanted to create Formica dirksii, so that is a member of both of those. what would our option around it be? Well, alternatively, we could do this. We could create Formica Dirksey class, and we could say that the class is a subclass of ant. And then we could create another one Formica Dirksey individual, and that is an instance of endangered species. And so now we've just created two different things to refer to like the class version and the individual version of something. And because we want Formica Dirksey the class and Formica Dirksey the individual to be related to each other in some way, maybe we can create some new property here as well that's like has individual version Formica Dirksey individual. Or we could go in the other direction, right, and have has class version Formica Dirksey class. So option 1, again, is like this. That's punning. Option 2 is that instead of punning and creating something that is both an individual and class, we can create separate aspects of Formica Dirksey, one to be the class version and one to be the individual version, and then we can link them together in some way. Neither of those options feel awesome. This one feels pretty intuitive, but now we should say, okay, it feels intuitive. Why shouldn't we do it? The first consequence is that the reason that individuals and classes are made to be disjoint in OWL DL is because it keeps the logic decidable. So the DL stands for description logic. Simpler logics are good because you can explore the entire proof space more easily. And in OWL DL, we can guarantee that we can solve any possible proof, any possible inference that you would do over your ontology in a finite amount of time. But if we extend that and we allow things to be both individuals and classes, that essentially creates the possibility of classes of classes of classes of classes of classes, right? We can build that up. That regression makes our system potentially infinitely complicated, which means there could be some proofs that we could not complete before the heat death of the universe. And if you're someone who likes an ontology that is compact and decidable and easy to run all of the reasoning over, then you don't want to be doing punning. This approach down here, where we split it up into its class and its individual factions, is decidable, but it has this really undesirable feature that for everything that we want to say multiple things about, we have to like split it into multiple triples, right? And this doesn't feel as clean of a metaphysical layout to me as something like this that's committing punning. All right. Let's talk about another way that you can do punning here, though. So this was punning where we treat something as both a named individual and as a class, but you can also pun by taking properties and making those properties both data type and object properties. So why might you do that? What would that look like? Well, let's expand on our ant ontology here and say that we want to create a particular ant named Anthony, and we want to say that he is an instance of Formica Dirksey. Not too hard. We'll create our new entity, Anthony, and they are a Formica Dirksey. Great. And now let's say we want to say some things about this ant, like that they have family relations. So we can create some like sibling ants, right? We could say Anthony has familial relation. I don't know, maybe a familial relation with some like really general piece here. They have one with Sarah, right? Or with Judy. They're just related to these other ants, presumably, right? But then we can create more specific properties if we want. Like instead of has familial relationship with, we can have has mother. Cool. And so then we could say that Anthony has mother, Marie Antoinette. But then we could also, if we wanted to, like create another property like has uncle or has brother. Now, I went really fast over this, so maybe you didn't notice it, but what happened here when I said Anthony has mother, Marie Antoinette? What was going on? To those of you who were like focused and astute, you might have noticed that has familiar relationship with or relation with is supposed to be an object property, which means we're going to connect two named individuals like Anthony and Sarah. But this connects Anthony and Marie Antoinette, but Marie Antoinette is a string. So this means that hasMother, right, is being treated as a data type property, which means that hasMother is both a data type property and, by being a subproperty of hasFamilial it's an object property. And those two things are in tension, which means in this representation, hasMother is a punned property. And again, what are our options here? Well, either we do this same move that we did with Formica Dirksey, and we say, look, it's just an object or it's just a class and an individual. And down here we say it's just an object property and a data type property. It's both. So that's punning. That means we're violating OWL. The other thing that we could do with hasMother is we could create two different properties for it. We could create hasMother object and hasMother data type, one that would connect us to strings, one that would connect us with things. Both approaches are defensible. We could also say things about like who Anthony's uncles are, right? Which would be kind of confusing because it turns out that all of Anthony's uncles are ants. But, So that's what it is to pun. That's how you might be motivated to do it, right? You might want to pun just because it's the sensible thing to do, and that the alternative is creating like these split off like class and individual versions of your entities, or data type and object type properties that are related but not quite the same thing. Are those consequences worth it, right? Like, you want to pun, but will you be punished for doing so? First and foremost, just don't stress too much about it. Punning is something that's like very controversial, and I've been in a number of conversations with folks where they like tie themselves up in knots, and like it's good to think about these things and try and think of what the implications are going to be. But the truth is, for any model that you build, as it gets sophisticated enough, you're going to run up against the boundaries of what's easy to do with OWL. And what we see here in our two options are, in one, we have to make the sacrifice of the simplicity of model, right? We don't want to pun, so we're going to have to bifurcate a bunch of our entities. And that makes the model more complicated looking, maybe more metaphysically suspect, harder to query, right? Those are serious drawbacks. Those are drawbacks. But on the other hand, if we do pun, then it means that we can't use the reasoners out of the box in the way that we would want to, right? So HermiT, Elk, these reasoners are looking for an OWL DL reasoning profile. And if you're punning, you're breaking that. And so you're not going to be able to leverage them in the way that they were intended. And it depends. I don't know for each of them how this works. Sometimes when you try and use a reasoner and you've got punning in your file, it will just say, nope, this isn't for me. Sometimes it will still run the reasoner, but it will ignore things that are puns. That might depend on what order you put stuff in. And so if it's first mentioned as a class, it will just treat it as a class everywhere. And whenever it would normally be an individual, it'll ignore that and pretend those triples don't exist. So the cost is either the reasoner doesn't work at all, or it might not work the way that you expect it to. And both of those are tricky. And that's why you should let the use cases guide you. So often people get so excited about doing awesome reasoning or building the perfect model that then when they start to build it and they have to think about punning, they're twisted in knots because they can't do everything. Well, you're probably not going to do everything with your model anyway. Stop and think, what are the queries? What are the things I'm going to be asked to do? What are the applications I'm supporting? And if you get really concrete with what those are, what you're probably going to find out is you'd be fine either way. On the other hand, you might find that you really need to use the Elk or HermiT reasoner, and so your model's going to have to be a little more complicated than you thought. You're just not going to go with the punning, and that's totally fine too. Right, but just let your use cases drive you. That will give you an answer. And if the use cases don't give you a specific answer, then that means you're pretty much fine either way that you want to go. And also remember, you can refactor things later. So you're going to build something, it's going to go wrong, and you're going to have to go back and edit it. We don't want to do this all the time, but it's totally doable. It's code. It's a file like anything else. And so if you have to make edits later, you will. Don't freak out about whether punning is absolutely the right decision for you now or not. So let's summarize what we've got here. Punning is a case when you take a single IRI to refer to more than one type of thing. And in particular, in OWL-RDF, punning is the technical understanding that you're treating something to be both a named individual and a class, or you're treating a property as both an object property and a data type property. And when we require something to be part of these two meta classes that are of incompatible types, it's going to break OWL, which means that it's going to have to go into another reasoner or not use that reasoning at all, right? It's going to be an OWL full profile. The consequences for this are real, and people are really passionate about whether punning is allowed or not allowed. But my view on this is just do what you like to do. Both ways have their costs and benefits. And personally, I pun all the time with classes and individuals, and I almost never pun with object and data type properties. It just seems like the right workflow to me. Now, you can take that, run with it, and see if that advice holds true to you. If you have any feedback or response to this, go ahead and drop it down in the comments. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you can persuade me. Maybe I should never pun again. At least not in LRDF. On that note, I'm really sorry that I threw a bunch of bad jokes into this video, but you know, I just couldn't resist it. You can't really blame me. And at least I didn't throw in any German sausage jokes, because those are the worst. All right, now we've got like an after the credits section. This is my first time doing this, but I thought it might be kind of fun. I was not joking about asking some LLMs to give me some good jokes, and also not joking that they were terrible. So please join me in a reading of what Gemini produced as OWL RDF puns. See if you think they're as bad as I do. Number 1, when your ontology starts punning, you know things are getting a little unclassy. Number 2, punning in OWL is truly a type of error that reasoners just can't bear. And it also gives me explanations for these. I didn't like, it's a play on type and the bear homophone, relating it to RDF type and the inability of reasoners to handle it. It's pretty rough. That's not a good one. All right, number 3. Some might say that using the same IRI for a class and an individual is out of range for OWL. I'm like, okay, not good. 4. My reasoner looked at my punned ontology and said, "This is not an object I've definition." I don't get it. Don't get it at all. Number 5. If you pun too much, your ontology might just fall full of contradictions. Which is apparently a play on the phrase fall full, which is not a phrase I'm familiar with at all, but also it's a play on owlful, which is something, so okay. Number 6. Punning is like trying to put a square class into a round individual whole. It just doesn't compute. 7. My ontology was so badly punned, the reasoner just threw its hands up and declared, "Undecidable." Almost okay? No. 8. What do you call an IRI that's both a class and a property? Bi-typed for trouble. I'll also read the explanation on this one because I didn't even get where it was going. It's a play on bipolar or similar phrases and RDF type. Thank you, Gemini. Truly, truly good stuff. Number 9. When I showed my friend my punned ontology, he said, "That's not delightful at all." This one I kind of like a little bit, right? Not DL, it's a play on OWL. There's actually a play there. So 9 I'm giving some credit for. And then my favorite one was this one. Favorite in a bad way, of course. Number 10. An object property and a data type property walk into a bar. The bartender says, "Hey, you can't be both of those."